Tien returned home in a state of turmoil. He still could not accept that Tu Tien had firmly refused to come back, but as he stepped into the old house, he realized that another crisis was waiting for him. There was no longer the usual noisy atmosphere. His mother sat on a rickety bamboo chair, her eyes deeply etched with worry. "Mum?" Tien called softly, but before he could ask anything, his mother abruptly stood up, her voice filled with frustration. "Do you even have a mind left to go anywhere? Our house is about to collapse, don't you know?" Tien froze. His mother forcefully threw her conical hat to the ground, her eyes red with anger and despair. "Our house is drowning in debt, there is no money left, and now there is nothing to manage." Tien felt as if the blood in his body had frozen. Until now, although they were never rich, he had never been this worried. Now, with Tu Tien gone and the person he trusted, Hoang, having taken all the money and run away, this house was burdened with mounting debts. At that moment, his father returned home. Mr. Phuc entered, his face showing clear signs of exhaustion. Upon hearing the grim news, he sighed deeply, his eyes clouded with time as he looked at Tien. "What have you done to bring us to this misery?" Tien could not answer. He lowered his head, his hand clenched into a tight fist. "What are we going to do now? This house cannot collapse." His mother burst into tears, her voice filled with helplessness. With no other option, they were forced to sell every last duck and chicken, their final assets, in hopes of raising enough money. As his mother sat beside the chicken coop, her eyes reflecting the pain of a woman who had spent her life worrying only to end up empty-handed, Tien stood there, silently watching. He remembered Tu Tien. Once, when she was still here, even in poverty, at least there was someone in the house who shouldered the burdens and managed everything. Yet he failed to recognize her worth and drove her away in disgrace. Now, as he returned, everything was in ruins, just like his life at that moment, shattered and empty. The sound of chickens clucking in their cramped coop filled the air as his mother quickly wiped away tears streaming down her cheeks. Mr. Phuc said nothing, merely standing silently, staring at the empty yard. He had once believed himself strong, a man who could control the family and decide the fate of others. But now he realized he had nothing at all. The only person who had truly loved him and genuinely cared for this family had been the one he had driven out the door. In recent days, the atmosphere in Tien's house had grown increasingly tense. The enormous losses left his mother unable to remain calm. Every day she wept and blamed others. Tien sat with his knees drawn up on the porch, his empty gaze fixed on the barren yard. He had nothing left now. All the money was gone, the livestock were gone, and a life that had always been difficult now had fallen into complete deadlock. Finally, after many days of inner struggle, Shan's mother decided to report the matter to the police. Sitting by the edge of her bed, her voice rough from many sleepless nights, she declared, "We cannot let them take everything from our home without being held responsible. We must find the thief." Tien said nothing, only nodding silently. This was the only way to hope to regain justice, even though he was not sure what the police could do at this point. The next morning, officers from the local police department arrived at the house, carrying ledgers and notepads. They sat at the rickety wooden table in the empty living area, asking about every detail. "What assets have been lost?" one asked. "Buffalo, money, chickens and ducks. Everything is gone," Tien's mother replied, her voice breaking with anger. The officers silently took notes, their eyes scanning the impoverished home. Tien sat across from them, his hands clenched tightly. He did not know what else to say. Everything was unfolding like a nightmare from which he could not wake. The police then asked, "Do you suspect anyone?" Tien's mother pursed her lips, and a hint of bitterness flashed in her eyes. She hesitated before coldly stating, "Isn't it that little girl?" There was no need for further explanation. Everyone knew she was referring to Tu Tien. A chill of emptiness surged within Tien. He understood all too well that even though Tu Tien was no longer here and had endured enough hardships, his mother would never let her go. One of the officers looked at her with suspicion. "Are you saying Tu Tien?" "There is no proof. I cannot be certain, but she is the daughter-in-law of this household. Now that she is gone, who else could have entered here?" she replied. Unable to bear it any longer, Tien stood up abruptly, his voice raw. "Mom, do not say those things anymore." His mother flinched, but still turned her face away stubbornly. Mr. Phuc sighed, his eyes heavy with regret. The police continued taking notes before standing up. "We will conduct further investigations. If we find any leads, we will notify you." The officers in their blue uniforms left, leaving behind an atmosphere in the house heavier than ever before. In the midst of the police investigation into the theft, the atmosphere in Tien's house remained tenser than ever. His mother no longer cursed as before. Instead, she sighed and gazed emptily into the vacant yard. Mr. Phuc sat on the steps, his eyes clouded as he stared off into the distance without a word. And Tien, since everything had happened, was no longer the confident man who used to puff up his chest. Unable to simply wait, Tien began to rely on his connections to seek out any news. He knew that if the police continued their investigation, sooner or later they would identify the culprit, but he did not want to wait in vain. He needed to know who was behind this. He needed an answer. Every day, Tien visited his acquaintances and inquired about any clues. He spoke to buffalo traders, brokers, and even mingled in the village. These conversations took place at roadside diners and over quiet meals with an old friend. Slowly, small pieces of evidence began to form a pattern. Meanwhile, the police continued their investigation without pause. The officers worked day and night, reviewing every testimony and every small piece of evidence. After several days of diligent work, they finally collected enough evidence to determine the identity of the thief. Ironically, it turned out to be the person Tien had never expected. When the police announced the results, Tien was left speechless. The culprit was the one person he had once trusted, the one he had considered a partner in life. The entire household fell silent when the truth was revealed. His mother collapsed into her chair, murmuring indistinct words, while Mr. Phuc bowed his head, his hand trembling as he clutched an old bamboo stick. Tien was no longer filled with anger as before. Instead, he felt an inexplicable emptiness. For so long, he had been so blinded by his own arrogance that he allowed those unworthy to enter his life and lost everything as a result. He thought of Tu Tien. She had once been the only one who truly cared for this family, yet he had driven her out of the house and forced her to endure months of humiliation. Now, with the truth exposed, she was still out there alone, bearing all her suffering without anyone by her side. The afternoon wind blew by, carrying the chill of dusk. Tien stood in the yard, feeling as though everything was slowly slipping out of his grasp. He had lost the only person who had ever loved him unconditionally. After many days of investigation, the police finally discovered the culprit who had stolen the assets of Tien's family. The name mentioned left his entire household speechless. Hoai, the woman he had once trusted and believed would bring him a better life. But it turned out that she was the one who had left his family penniless. Through the testimony of the buffalo traders, the police determined that Hoai was the one who had sold Tien's buffalo. Following the trail of clues, they went to the house of the man who had bought the buffalo and eventually to Hoai's current residence. With no other choice, the police decided to go directly to the location and arrest her for trial. One morning, a team of local police set out. They traversed the rugged, rocky roads, stopping at marketplaces and small diners to gather information. Finally, they reached the place where Hoai was hiding, a small house on the edge of the village where she was trying to cover up her crimes. When the police burst in, Hoai was stunned. Her deceitful eyes darted around, seeking a way to escape, but every exit was blocked. She tried to feign innocence and pretended to be naive. "What do you want with me? I haven't done anything wrong." But when the police presented evidence and the testimonies from those who had bought the buffalo, she could no longer deny the facts. "We have enough evidence to confirm that you stole the assets of Mr. Phuc's family. Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Hoai collapsed to her knees, tears streaming down her cheeks, but no one cared about those tears anymore. She had once appeared gentle, even captivating Tien to the point where he abandoned his former wife. Now that her true self was exposed, her real face was revealed to everyone. While being led away, Hoai continued to struggle and stutter, pleading, "Please forgive me, I did not mean to, I needed the money." But no one showed any sympathy. Everything she had done was too clear. When the news of Hoang's arrest spread, Tien's household fell into a fearful silence. His mother sat on the floor, her eyes empty. She had placed her trust in Hoai, treated Tien terribly, and in the end, the one she was protecting turned out to be a traitor, while the poor daughter-in-law was left to suffer in disgrace. Tien stood on the porch, gazing at the sky with a heart filled with bitterness. He had destroyed his own life, and the only person he needed to find now, the only person who could understand his pain, was the one he had driven away the furthest, Tu Tien. After everything was cleared up, Tien's mother sat on the floor, her eyes empty as she gazed out into the yard. She had lost everything, from property to honor, but what troubled her most was that she had driven Tu Tien out of the house so harshly. Now, knowing that the daughter-in-law was innocent, she wanted her to come back. "Tien, at any cost you must bring her back to me," she said, her voice hoarse from too much crying. Mr. Phuc also nodded in agreement. He had never defended Tu Tien when she was expelled, but in his heart he always believed that she was a gentle and hard-working daughter-in-law. When Tien heard this, he only lowered his head in silence. He had been wrong too many times. Now, with everything in shambles, he was not sure if he could ever fix things. But he still decided to go find her. He went to see the village chief, hoping that the man could help him. The village chief looked at Tien for a long moment, and then sighed. "Now you finally decide to go find her. Do you have any idea how much suffering she has endured?" the chief asked. Tien said nothing. He only hoped that he could bring Tu Tien back, and that she could forgive him. Together with the village chief, Tien followed a narrow path leading into the forest. He knew where she was staying, in a small cave hidden behind thick foliage. When he arrived, he saw her crouching as she gathered bamboo to make a shelter from the rain. Her small, frail figure made his heart ache. "Tu Tien, come back with me," Xian said, his voice full of urgency. Tu Tien startled and turned to look at him. When she saw him, her eyes were so cold that they made him shudder. "Come back for what? To be cast out again?" she asked. Her voice was gentle yet full of pain. She did not cry, did not scold. She simply showed that she no longer wished to return. The village chief also spoke, offering counsel. "Tu Tien, you have suffered enough. Now that their family has recognized their mistakes, can you give them another chance?" Tu Tien gave a faint smile, her eyes expressionless. "Do they want me back because they need me, or because they are truly remorseful?" That question left Chen speechless. He could not answer. Tu Tien said nothing more. She simply turned and stepped into the cave. She no longer cared for the place once called home. It was the place that had driven her out without a shred of compassion. Chen stood there, watching her figure disappear, his heart filled with bitter regret. He knew that this time she had truly left him forever.
Lặng lẽ chảy dài trên đôi má hốc hác. Cô không còn đủ sức gạt đi những giọt lệ tủi nhục, chỉ có thể lặng lẽ cúi đầu đi, giấu đi nỗi đau dâng tràn trong lòng ngực. Những tiếng cười nói rộn ràng trong nhà vọng ra như nhát dao cứa vào tim cô, trong khi người đàn bà mới được rút về đang tận hưởng cuộc sống. Sự chăm sóc chu đáo từ mẹ chồng, ăn ngon mặc đẹp, được cưng chiều như một bà hoàng, thì cô vẫn nai lưng làm lộn như một kẻ ở trong chính căn nhà mà cô từng coi là mái ấm. Mẹ chồng chưa bao giờ dành cho cô một ánh nhìn thương xót, bà ta chỉ biết quát tháo, chửi mắng, xem cô như một kẻ vô dụng, một cái gai trong mắt mà họ chưa thể nhổ bỏ hoàn toàn. Mày làm gì mà chậm chạp thế hả? Cơm nước không lo, suốt ngày chỉ biết thở dài than thở. Đồ đàn bà vô dụng. Tiếng mẹ chồng thê thế vang lên khiến Tử Tiên giật mình. Vội vàng lau nước mắt đủ thừa bước vào trong bếp tiếp tục công việc của mình. Những ngày qua cô không biết khóc bao nhiêu lần, từ sáng đến tối mệt cô phải lo hết mọi việc trong nhà, nấu nước, giặt giũ, trẻ cô gánh nước. Tay cô chai sạn, lưng cô mỏi nhiều nhưng cô vẫn không dám